All right, you guys, excuse me. This video is to show you using your graphing calculator, your TI, how you can take a table of data like this and create a couple of different things. We're going to create a line of regression, a scatter plot, and find the correlation coefficient. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is we have to take this table and we have to enter this data into the calculator. So in order to do that, what you need to do is hit the Stat button, and then number 1, you're going to hit Edit. So in this case, I've already entered in the data, and I purposely didn't use list 1 or list 2 because you can use any of the lists that you want. So in list 3, I put in, if we look at the data, we're looking at the number of absences a student has, and then we're looking at their final grade. Okay, so we're wondering, how does the number of absences affect the final grade that a student gets? So you can take a moment and figure out, what is this going to look like? Is the more absences somebody have going to be a greater grade or a lower grade? Okay, so I put in the number of absences in list 3. And really quickly, just if you want to say everything's full of data, or say list 1 and list 2 are full of data and you want to use them, like let's say there's some like numbers in here, you don't want to erase them, whoops. You don't want to erase them one by one. You can arrow, let me get back there, all the way, sorry you guys, arrow all the way up to the top so that you are highlighting the actual list. Then hit clear on the calculator and enter, and that'll clear out the whole list. And you need to make sure that your numbers are next to, that the correct input is next to the correct output. Okay, so I basically just entered this table into my lists, and I used lists 3 and 4. So that's the first step. So if you are writing these notes down in your notebook, your first step is to enter the data into your lists by hitting the Stat button and then the Edit button. Okay, once you have your data into the lists, it's really easy to create a scatter plot. Okay, so in order to create a scatter plot, you're going to do the following. You're going to hit the second button on the calculator, which is the blue button, I think, on most of your calculators. And when you hit the blue button, that means that any of the buttons on the calculator that you hit, you're not going to get what's written on the actual button. You're going to get what is written in blue. It matches the second button on top of it. If your second button is not blue, the color should match whatever the second button color is. So I'm going to hit the second button, and then I'm going to hit the y equals button. But what's actually going to happen is the stat plot, which is written above it. So I'm going to hit that. Okay. The first thing you need to do is make sure only one of your stat plots is on. Okay, so if you have something in 1 that you don't want to use, you're going to go into 1. I'm going to turn this off. Okay, and then I'm going to go back into my stat plots. Now they're all off. I can choose whichever one I want to use. Let's say I want to do stat plot 3. Hit enter. This time I need to hit enter on the on so that it's the on that is blinking. If I arrow down, here is all of the different types of graphs I can create with my data. We just want a scatter plot. So I'm just going to make sure it's blinking on the scatter plot, hit enter. I'm going to arrow down. I did not put my data into list 1 and 2. I put my input into list 3. So you have to do the second button and then the number 3, which will come up as L3. And I put my output, or my response variable, into list 4. So I need to hit the second button, and then I hit the number 4, which above it in blue is L4. Those are the 2 I did. Here you can choose what shape you want the dot to be. So right now it's this one, that's fine. It really doesn't matter. You can even change the color. Oh, magenta, I love this color. I'm just going to use that one, I think. Okay. Then, and this is, actually I'm going to delete something first. But once, so let's pretend that that didn't happen. Let's go back to the stat plot. Once you are in the stat plot and you've changed it the way you want it to be, then you're gonna go to zoom. This is really important because if you are trying to make a statistical plot, you are going to want to go into the zoom button, and you are always going to want to choose zoom stat. So number 9. So see how those match up with the stat plot? You want to do zoom stat, hit enter, boom, there are my numbers. So as on the x-axis, as my number of absences is getting larger, my grade, which would be on the y-axis, is going down. So this is a negative relationship. So that's my scatter plot. Now what I can do is I can make a linear regression line. So in middle school, and maybe your freshman year of high school, we would have called this a line of best fit, but now we're going to call it a linear regression line, and we're going to use the calculator to do it. So what have we done so far? We've entered in our data, we've created a scatter plot. Now we're going to create our linear regression line, our line of best fit. You do not have to create the scatter plot first. I just wanted to show you how to do that. So if you don't need the scatter plot, you can just go straight to making your linear regression line. The way we do that is we go back into stat. Actually, I'm going to quit out first because we need to be on the main screen or you might get some weird errors. So always second quit before you start a new function. We're going to go back into the stat. This time we're going to arrow over to calc. So you may remember this is where we go to do our one variable statistics. But that's not what we're going to choose this time. We are either going to choose 4, which stands for linear regression ax plus b, where a is the slope and b is the y-intercept, just like the formula for a line, right? Or a linear relationship anyway. Or you can choose 8, which is how, it's not going to change the math, but this is how statisticians look at it. So in this case, A is the y-intercept and B is going to be your slope. So it doesn't matter which one you choose, okay? But you need to remember what the letters stand for. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose 8, okay? I have already put in list 3 and list 4, but you need to double check which lists did you use? Did you use list 1, in which case you need to go second 1 to change that to list 1. Now I'm going to have to change it back. Okay, this is fine. So I already used list 3 and 4, so that's correct. I don't need frequency list right now. We will in a couple of weeks. Storing our regression equation. Let's put this equation into the y equals so that we can graph it later. You do not have to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do this. So what you do is you hit vars, which is next to the clear button. And then you're going to arrow over to y vars, hit enter on function, and I'm going to click y1. And then calculate. Okay. This is what's going to show up on your calculator. Actually, you may not get the r squared and the r value. The r is our correlation coefficient. R squared is that number squared. I will show you, if this did not pop up, I will show you what you need to change on your calculator to make it pop up. But first, let's just go ahead and look at our equation. It tells you at the top that this looks like y equals a plus bx. So a is our y-intercept, 88.7. That means if you had 0 absences, you should get the predicted grade that you would get is 88.7 approximately. B is our slope, negative 2.8 approximately. The slope means that for every absence that you have, your grade is going to go down by approximately 2.8%. That's the prediction. So since we stored this into y1, if we hit the y equals, there's our equation. Pretty dope, right? So what's cool about storing it is it doesn't give you the approximate number, it gives you the complete decimal, which will really help you out. Now if I hit graph, okay, not only do I still have my scatter plot, but now I have my linear regression equation, my line of best fit, right? And you can kind of see an outlier here. I would say this might be the only outlier. These two up here are kind of close, pretty close. It is, the correlation coefficient is negative 0.94. That is pretty close to a perfect negative relationship. I'm not sure if this data is real, but I would assume that the less absences you have, the better grade you are going to get. Now, let's go back. If you did not get that correlation coefficient, okay, which is important, this is what you have to do on your calculator. You need to hit second and then your catalog, which is above the 0. Okay, then we need to go all the way down to the D's. If you don't want to arrow all the way down, you can skip to the D's by doing alpha, the alpha button, and then my alpha is green, and I need to find the green D, which is above x to the -1 here. Oops, my alpha button didn't get picked. So second, catalog, alpha, D. Why didn't it hit the D? Alpha, D, there we go. So now it's the D's. Now I can just arrow down to what we're looking for is diagnostic on. Turn your diagnostic on. So once I've arrowed down to diagnostic on, I hit enter, you hit enter. Once that has been completed, you should now be able to see your correlation coefficient, okay? So really quickly, just to go over, just finding your correlation coefficient, you would put in your data, stat, calc, arrow down. I'm using 8. You could use 4. Just remember what the letters stand for. Enter. I use list 3 and 4. I'm not going to store my equation again, but if you wanted to, you would go, well, I guess I will. Vars, y vars, function, put it in y1, arrow down, calculate. Now you've gotten the y-intercept, the slope, and at the very bottom, your correlation coefficient. Don't forget, -1 is a perfect negative linear relationship. +1 is a perfect positive linear relationship.